So why don't I go ahead and kick it off? And Shanee, I presume you're ready with your slides, content, etc. Um, the goal out of the call today is really to share some best practices and experiences around this concept that we all know well, product-led growth. But the concept that we know has a lot more nuances to it than just a definition of a go-to-market thesis. There's a lot more around operational alignment, the data, when it works, the ownership of these metrics, and just really diving into some.
He's not alive. He's dead. So
let's see, who's that? Jeff Park. I'm going to mute him. There you go. Whoever Jeff Park is. So I have master mute control in case anybody wants to do that again. All right. So with that, Shanee, why don't we kick it off? So Shanee's got an amazing background. She's currently leading marketing at Crunchbase, of course, one of Mayfield's portfolio companies, but a well-established career in building the go-to-market efforts for various companies. And she can tell you a little bit more about her learning experiences there. We're going to use chat to promote questions. So if you've got a question that you want to ask, just type it in. I'll try to politely interrupt Shanee so we don't stop her flow of conversation here, but bring up the questions, let you have it as dialogue friendly as possible. So feel free to jump in at any moment with your question. And so with that, Shanee, why don't I turn it to you?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Shanee Ben-Zur. I'm the Chief Marketing and Growth Officer at Crunchbase. I've been at Crunchbase.
And oh, by the way, you don't need any slides, Shanee. So it's just whatever you want to present. So yep.
We were at sales kickoff a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was last week. It's all a blur. And I did present to our sales team about what product-led growth is, because as you might expect, the sales teams are probably the most fearful of what PLG is. So I'm happy to share some of the slides that we talked about there. So yeah, I've been at Crunchbase for just over 4.5 years. Before that, I was at Dropbox for 4.5 years, pre and post IPO. And then also had some time at Salesforce, NVIDIA. And then I was doing PR for a bunch of companies, including PlayStation in the US and in Europe. So I've gotten a chance to see growth from the full marketing stack and also from product-led growth companies' perspective. So I have a lot of affinity for PLG, and I've also seen how PLG has gone not so well sometimes. And I have lots of thoughts on ways that I would do it differently if I could go back in time. Just so I have a sense, how many of you already have PLG motions at your company? Either like raise a hand or put it in the chat, just so I know like what's the level we're starting with from here. Got one solid no. Just starting out, starting to see it. Okay, we got a solid yes. So we've got really at least in this not statistically significant sampling, the full gamut from no to getting started to we're deep in it. So I'll do my best to give a little bit of something for everyone, but also feel free if you have specific questions that you came in today with, where you're like, just tell me the answer to this. Just feel free to put that in the chat, and I'm happy to try to get to it. But one thing that I found was interesting, at least within Crunchbase, is that there's a lot of perceptions of what PLG is. And so I'm going to tell you how I define it, just so that we kind of start with a similar view of what it is. So I'm going to share my screen. And again, these were slides that were done at an internal Crunchbase event. So apologies for them not being the most beautiful, but my brand is, my personal brand is effective slides that aren't necessarily the most beautiful. So I typically like to bring in a dating metaphor to everything. So I don't know if any of you watch a lot of television, but I watch an enormous amount of television. And there are 3 dating shows that I have watched. One is The Millionaire Matchmaker, which is extremely problematic. One is Indian Matchmaking, which is incredible and lots to learn. And another one is Married at First Sight. And when I think about these shows, in my mind, they match the more traditional, like sales-led or traditional enterprise-led B2B experience, which is you have the prospect, i.e. a person looking for a mate, and then you have the match, i.e. the person also looking for a mate, but they can't actually find each other. So what this looks like in the enterprise world is you have a prospect who's trying to buy a product, and then you have the product over here, but they can't meet each other. They need a matchmaker in the middle to say, oh, I see you and I see this product, and I think you two would be a fit for these reasons. This is, again, like I said, not the most beautiful, but they achieve the point. In the sales world, you have the prospect, you have the product, and then you have your revenue team in the middle who are saying, I will be the connective tissue for you, but you can't find each other on your own. There's pros and cons to this, right? You know, if you have that matchmaker, they're an expert. Theoretically, they've seen 1,000 different people like you. They deeply know the product. So when they try to connect you, they should be pretty good at it, right? If you have a good matchmaker, they know how to find you the right mate. But the downside is you're putting an enormous amount of trust into that matchmaker. You're essentially saying to the salesperson, okay, you know me better than I know myself, despite the fact that I've known myself for many more years than you have. And you're going to tell me how I can use this product the best. So it's an okay motion, but you can see how there's limitations. Another TV analogy, if we just think about pure product-led growth, that's online dating. Product-led growth is a customer or a prospect can view any product they want to, they can give it a shot. This is just like with online dating. You can see all of your prospects, you're swiping, you're getting to talk to them. There's no filtering. It's really chaotic. It's a little bit overwhelming, but at least you get to be the ultimate decision maker for yourself. So what this looks like in the PLG motion is you have a prospect who has a direct connection to the product. But imagine if there was a world where you could bring the two of those things together in a best case scenario. And this is what, at least at Crunchbase, we're calling product-led everything, or PLX, where you could still enable the prospect to talk to the product if they want to, but you might also provide them support from a relationship expert. This is my little Yenta emoji here. This is somebody that you could call on to help you. Imagine if when you were, trying to find a mate, you could have a relationship expert who is on standby, who could help you through the initial dating phase to being, 30 years into your marriage as a relationship expert. That is what a PLX motion could be. And this is the equivalent of a hybrid self-serve plus direct sales or product-led sales, or there's a lot of ways that people are talking about it today. So that's how I'm thinking about it, is you are letting your prospects get a taste of what your product is. They can make the decision to purchase on their own if they want to, or you can also bring in the support of a human being to accelerate the process or make the process better. And this person's job changes from just trying to get somebody into the highest ACV product to trying to help them solve their problem the best way, where it's not about, the total ACV, it's about time to first dollar. It's about how do you get them to realize value as quickly as possible. And this revenue expert is kind of like a hybrid between a customer support person, a therapist, a marketer, and a salesperson. They're not the traditional sales profile. And a couple of the ways that we're also seeing this in the real world is, imagine when you're at the supermarket. Traditional enterprise sales is, all of the cold medicines are behind a locked door. And you're like, I really just need to buy some Robitussin because I'm sick or my kid is sick. And then you have to push that button and you have to wait for somebody to saunter over to you. And it's a very embarrassing situation where then they're awkwardly looking over your shoulder and you're just like trying to read all the medicine labels on your own. That's a lot of what being an enterprise prospect feels like. You have the salesperson who's breathing down your back and you're like, I'm just looking for something that's going to help with my SOC 2 compliance. And then you have the PLG world where you walk into an aisle and you've got 10,000 versions of a Band-Aid and you're like, I don't freaking know. I just want to cover up a cut. Can somebody please tell me which of these is the best Band-Aid to buy? And then you have the PLX world where you walk into Costco and you've got a choice to choose what products you want, but then you get this free trial from a lovely lady named Mary. She's telling you, how would you like to try this little hot dog here?
They are not
And
done
it ends
with
up
stuff.
Which one?
They're not.
Got him.
Got him. You're good on that. It's like a whack-a-mole. So this is kind of what we're trying to do, is this experience where you have the freedom to choose, but if you need a little help choosing, or maybe you're not even considering something that could be great, we're there to help you out. Similarly, at the checkout counter, if you want to talk to a salesperson while you're checking out, you can, but also we now have this option of pure self-serve. where you can just check out on your own if you want to. So that's how I'm coming to what is PLG today. And my preference, my strong preference is this like product-led everything, where it's more of a hybrid motion, where you give people the option to self-serve on their own if they want to. But you also have a kind of revenue/sales team that's available to help them at the right time, using the right kind of qualification signals of when we should be reaching out to them.
So Shanee, let's break down some of the core questions here. I mean, the definition's awesome. PLX, I think, is involved sort of thinking about it, but when in the early product definition do we decide, hey, this is going to be a PLG play? Who owns that? Is it the product team, the go-to-market team? And then what are the initial metrics that, and Asim was saying he tried it and pulled back. What are some of the metrics that determine it's working early on?
Yeah. So, and I also see this question about what if you don't have free trial or self-serve demo? I think a lot of the fear around PLG is that you feel like you have to go all in, like it's all or nothing. But I think there's a way to test it out in a smaller format. So imagine there's a specific feature that you could put behind a free trial rather than the whole product. And things that you want to test are, is the thing easy enough for a user to understand on their own without a human being? So if there's no possible way a person could get onboarded on your product on their own, or at least a feature of your product on your own, okay, maybe it doesn't make sense for you. But I would challenge everybody to think about, there's probably at least one feature in your tech stack, in your product set, that could be offered either as freemium, like you just give them access to it for free, or as part of a free trial. And you don't have to operationalize it right up front. You could do like a painted door test where you put it up on your website and say, hey, if you want to try this for free, click here. And then you use that to give you a sense of how much demand there is for it. Some of the metrics you want to look at are, if you're doing a pure freemium, how many people are actually visiting or using the product. If you're doing a free trial, you want to look at the trial start rate. So visitors to actually starting a trial, the trial to purchase conversion rate, and the activation rate during the trial. All of those give you signal about how much value you'll get. I highly recommend, though, if you are running an experiment of free trial versus not, that you look at the incremental ARR impact and you give yourself enough time to run the experiment. So let's say you're doing a 1 week free trial or a 1 month free trial. You're going to need to give yourself enough time to get to statistical significance, comparing how much ARR you get in your direct conversion versus how much ARR you'll get over time after enough people come through the trial experience. And what you might see is that you have a super high trial start rate, but the conversion rate is low, or the inverse could be true. Not as many people are starting a trial, but your conversion rate is much higher than, say, your close won rate for sales. So it could be a more efficient way of selling for your team.
So let's ask, see if we can answer Gopal's question. Gopal, I don't know if you want to add to your question, but we don't have a demo. We don't have a free trial sort of thing. What do? Do we sell them or give an ebook or something? I mean, is there some sort of bring them into the funnel because we don't really have that sort of product yet, and we're going to test whether our customers want that? I mean, what are your thoughts on sort of a preview to it?
Let me come out of mute and stop texting, because I have like few meetings going around in the same area that I'm sitting in, so I want to be less noisy here. Here's the challenge, right? So it's not only, I can give a feature to Shanee's point, right? I can give a feature, but the config itself will require hand holding. Like I'll have to configure the infrastructure for them to let them a 90-day free feature or a 100-day free feature. So that itself becomes challenging for us. Yes, we do have ebooks thanks to ChatGPT. I started creating ebooks by myself. We have product marketing, which is new, and we are working through that, right? So yes, we have ebooks. We have content that we can surely sell. But to the point made earlier was the 3 examples that were shared, where all of them were very relevant to having a demo or a trial. And for me, either one has to be configured on the client side. So just to get there is a challenge itself. Like once I can safely say, once we are there, from there, it's a demo, and then it's straight up POC. Like there is no doubt once they see the demo, there is no POC. But getting there is the challenge.
Yeah, in my mind, it's a question of when does the prospect have the product aha moment? So in the PLG world, the prospect can have the product aha moment on their own without any intervention. And in the traditional enterprise world, they have to have human intervention in order for them to experience some kind of product aha. And if there really is physically no way that any person could get any version of the aha, even if it's with like, you could imagine like stand-in data. So maybe it's not their personal company data, but it's like sandbox data. That could be how you offer them the aha moment, where they could experience it as a faux employee of a company that is using the product versus using theirs. That's something they could do on their own. The thing about the ebooks and the white papers is that's traditional demand generation. You have not yet experienced the product aha yourself. You have to feel it. It has to be tangible. So if there really is no possible way for you to do it, then maybe PLG isn't right. And I'm not saying PLG is always going to be right for everybody. But like I said, I would challenge you to think about, is there a way to create a sandbox version of it where they could kind of kick the tires on it on their own without a salesperson? And the more people who do try that sandbox, all of those people become leads, and more meaningful leads than, say, somebody who's downloading the ebook or the white paper.
And that was my intent to join this call. Like, I don't want to make judgment calls on a product and say, oh, we cannot do it. I'd rather learn and make an educated decision on, yep, it is not feasible. Or no, there is some possibility. Let's explore it and see how the trial will work.
Yep. And then
so I'll listen through. So to your point, right? I will listen through the call. I know you guys, there are many smart people on the call who will be discussing a couple of scenarios that can help me trigger the thought process. But to your point, if there's no trial, probably this is not the right call for me. But again, if it can help me figure out, can I do a trial of my product? And that will be really helpful to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think about old-timey Google when they were trying to show people why you should switch to Google Docs instead of using a Microsoft Word document. And one of the demos that they had was you could get into a document where these like virtual other people were collaborating with you. So it didn't require you to bring in your PII from your company. You could just get into this sandbox collaborative document where these imaginary other people were co-editing with you in the doc. And what that gave people is that aha moment of, oh my gosh, this is what real-time collaboration looks like. So if you have a clear idea of what is your, like the value moment, the high value first aha that somebody gets from your product, and you could recreate that in a sandbox environment that doesn't require them to bring their entire infra team, that could be an interesting way to offer. Maybe it's not a free trial, but it is some kind of a trial experience.
So maybe, Dinesh, maybe you want to ask your question. I see you've typed it here, but go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Shanee. Dinesh from Big Panda. Yeah, we're coming from a traditionally sales-led motion of many years and trying to now at least move towards product-led sales. And I think the old habits die hard of like, oh, I'm trying to land the biggest deal I can and get that big commission versus I want to land small and then grow that account over time. So like, I'm curious to hear from your perspective, the persona that kind of does well and more of that ladder. And then how does like a commission or a compensation model evolve in that new world? Thanks.
Yeah, that is exactly what I saw go wrong at Dropbox and exactly what we're trying to figure out at Crunchbase today. That kind of like, how do you align your incentives with a PLG model? Because oftentimes what ends up happening is the number one competitor that the sales team perceives is not your external competitor, it's the self-serve product. And so they start feeling like, why are you giving the self-serve product all these features? You should put it into my SKU. You're hurting my commissions. And so for me, that just comes down to, well, what is our incentivization structure and why is it not encouraging them to do the thing that we want them to? So one of the solves that we are talking about internally and something that we've seen other companies do, there's a couple of different ways. Some people go so far as to just move away from variable comp altogether. If you think about this in terms of like, some retail stores don't have their associates on a commission structure. And so you end up with much less of a hard sale. Whereas if you have the associates on a commission structure, they're selling you really hard. So you could go, that is like super far into the innovative category. I personally am not there because I feel like you're hiring somebody who's a hunter, so let them hunt. But what we are considering is maybe having like a 3-tiered commission structure where one tier is the overall company ARR, because what we want them to do is happy if the total company is winning rather than if just they are getting those big deals. The second tier is if there's like a behavior that's associated with them being good at their job. So maybe it is number of meetings or number of calls. It's like a little bit more tactical. And then the third tier is a version of like net promoter score, which essentially checks whether the person they interacted with was delighted by the interaction. So you start to have them be compensated based off of, is the whole team winning? Are they doing the right thing in their role? And are the people they're interacting with delighted by the experience? And we haven't rolled it out yet, and I'm sure it's like wrought with complications. But when we started talking to the sales team about that and telling them that like their comp structure would change, all of their attitudes changed. Because at the end of the day, they're just trying to like make sure that they can pay their bills. You know what I mean? If you're asking like, what's the right person to hire? If you don't already have a sales team, the right person to hire in my mind is somebody who actually comes more from the support side. Somebody who is coming from the perspective of, I want you to have the most enjoyment out of this product possible. And naturally prospects will start asking for more. An example that we just had at Crunchbase is we're running this experiment where once people start the trial, we're sending them an email and saying, like, it looks like it's coming from a member of our team. And it says, hey, saw you started your trial. I was curious if you've done an advanced search yet. Here are some of my favorite advanced searches. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. So it's like purely a support offer. And some of the responses that we've gotten from people are like, yeah, actually, I had a question about exports. If I like maxed out my exports, is there a way I could buy more exports? And is there somebody I could talk to for an enterprise demo? So like we had no intention of selling them, but they came back and they're like, give me more. So it was just really
more of that concierge sort of help, right?
Exactly. I like that. The concierge is really what you're going for.
Makes a lot of sense.
Asim, you had a question about, what's the right product? And I know you had texted before that you had tried it and pulled back. So maybe you could share a bit of the experience.
Yeah, definitely. So just quick introduction, founder of Immersa.ai. We've worked with several PLG companies to help them figure out how to take product usage data and figure out where there's a signal in that data for driving conversion and then operationalize that signal for them, or even further down with beyond conversion into post sales with churn risk and upsell opportunities and so on. And what we found, so we, in order for us to do what we do, we have to pull data from 2-3 different data sources that cut across different parts of the organization. So our product's designed to be self-service for the business user. And in our early understanding of PLG as a motion, we introduced that from our website. And it was actually a little scary because we had some very large public companies where the user just came in and connected their CRM data to us and shared their entire Salesforce with us. And we're like, we've got to pull back from this because we don't want to be in a position to be holding on to all this data without a formal agreement with these kinds of companies. And so that was like one incident, or a couple of incidents like that. And then we also realized that in order for us to get access to the right data, we've got to go to 2-3 different organizations, and facilitating that workflow online is pretty challenging. So as much as the product is simple enough to use, getting the access to the data is pretty hard. And so we actually pulled back from that motion after a 2-3 month experiment and said, well, let's develop this further. And then I think, Shanee, what I really liked you said earlier about find that one feature that people can get access to and start to get some value out of. And that is a good way to introduce a PLG motion. But that was kind of our experience. And that's I was curious, like, is there certain characteristics or boundaries in which PLG motions make more sense versus, is it applicable to any product, right? So that's where I was coming from.
Yeah, I mean, it's you talking about how people gave you all of their CRM data. For me, is a signal of, at the end of the day, these end users are just trying to do their job and they don't care how they do it. And they're like, yeah, I will sync this to that. If you're about to give me this value thing I want, sure, take it all. I'm not the person in charge of IT. That does come with risks indeed, but it's a signal of like, I think some people feel like a prospect would be unlikely to go through that process of giving access, but you'd find that people are way more likely to do it if they can do it on their own and they feel like it's going to get them to an outcome they want. So that's why I say like it's worth testing, even if you're not sure. And that signal will let you know whether it's really the right thing to pursue, whether PLG is the right thing for you to pursue. Maybe the ask is too high and I'm going to do it. In terms of the product itself, I mean, the obvious things are anything where you have a web interface, you should probably do PLG. Like if your product is accessed through a website, you can probably do some version of PLG. If you're more of an API solution where there isn't necessarily a web interface, it does get a little more difficult. But again, that's where the sandbox experience can be helpful for the user. I think professional services gets to be a little more difficult as well, but there's always a way to make it work if you really want to.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that response.
All right, what's the next question? Mohan, from your perspective, is a certain type of B2B ICP type? You want to ask your question directly? Mohan?
Yeah, we just curious if there's a certain type of ICP that's more willing to try PLG versus SLG. We're able to get quite a bit of traction in India, but in US it's been a little hard.
I find that there's almost like this inverse relationship where if a person is naturally more skeptical, they're more likely to try PLG, which is funny because a lot of like dev tools, people feel like, oh no, developers would never because they're more skeptical. But the reality is developers are more skeptical of salespeople than they are of trials. I think that's where, being clear about what data you're going to be taking, exactly how giving a little more heads up about exactly what the trial is going to offer will help. But like, I think one of the reasons why I'm an unusual marketer is I'm a skeptical buyer. I am a very skeptical person. I'm a very analytically minded person. So for me, who I'm selling to is people like me, not the ones who are believers. So I don't know if there's like a specific ICP that is more likely or not likely, but I do think that freemium offers skeptical people a way in that is less overwhelming than having to like push that button and wait for somebody to unlock the drug drawer for you.
At this point, we're actually targeting the front office, people like customer support and success. And I mean, we're not sure if that type of audience is willing to, try out and experiment things, go outside the norm.
Yeah. What I have seen, and I don't know if this is true for everybody. So obviously, when I encourage everybody to run their own experiments, but what I have seen is if you get really good at identifying the thing that makes their job impossible, or identifying the thing that makes their manager threaten them with getting fired, they will be much more likely to try the free trial that offers to resolve that for them. So like from the CX perspective, time to resolution or ticket deflection, those are the things that they're being told, like, we're going to downsize your team because you're not doing this, or even things that could mitigate like the potential of having a downsized team. If you offer that as a potential outcome of trying your product, they'll be very likely to start the trial because they want that outcome.
Got it. Thank you.
So Asim put in this metric, the NPS metric, and whether or not it's the right sort of indicator. And we sort of touched on some of the metrics before. Can you break down maybe not just NPS, but any other metrics that you find as good governors for you as you walk through kind of organizing success or failure, even early indications of failure of particular trials or things you're doing there at Crunchbase now?
Yeah, and I see, Vic, you have a question too, so I'm happy to answer that right afterwards. So the NPS, what I was mentioning, was more in the context of how are we going to change the comp structure for our sales team or people on variable comp. And it wouldn't necessarily be like true NPS. It would be some version of like, were you happy with this exchange with this human being? And that's more of a metric about how that human being performed. With the product itself, you're absolutely right. The Net Promoter Score might not be the best indicator. I think it is an indicator. Other indicators that would be better is if you have a data science team that can come up with a propensity model, either a propensity to buy, propensity to upsell, or propensity to retain, that is correlated with some combination of their firmographic and usage data, where it's a little bit about them and a little bit about how they use the product. Like an example is at Dropbox, an obvious thing we saw was that people who signed up using their corporate domain had a higher propensity to buy our mid-tier product versus people who signed up with a personal or like Gmail domain had a lower propensity. That's not something that we can change for you. It's not something, you know, if you don't have a business use case and you don't have a business email, I can't change it, but it tells me more of like a correlation thing that I should know. And then similarly, people who had used up all of their space in Dropbox were more likely to buy our mid-tier product. So then it became more a question of how can we help encourage people to see more reasons why they should put more things on Dropbox. And at Crunchbase, what we see is that there are people who do searches. And if you do a search, our current paywall only shows you 5 of the companies that meet your requirements, but only a subset of people actually search. Most people look up a company and then they append the word Crunchbase from Google, and then they end up on that profile. So for us, that signaled that we're missing out on a massive opportunity of capturing the demand of those users. So that's like a future growth experiment that we have coming, is how do you capture people who come in from an external search engine who aren't necessarily doing the internal search behavior.
All right, Vic, you've got your hand up here.
Yeah, I had the great topic, and this is Vic with Vectorflow, and we have a very enterprise security type product. So we've been in the traditional matchmaking. We do see that it's interesting for us during the sales process. The customer asks us generally, "Hey, can I have my own demo instance and something like that?" And we do make that part of our. So we're coming later in this game rather than in the early part, but I think the early. Look, I have a few questions. I don't know if you can answer all of them. One is, I love this idea that few features that can be easily shown, right? I don't know if anybody else had success of that. Does that make you feel like you only a 2-feature company, or no, you have the full suite? Just how do you kind of balance that? Is you still kind of like an appetizer, not the main menu, right? Just a little bit, any thoughts on that? And 2, how do you keep the sort of competitors out of it, like filter out the domains and things like that? How much information you capture before you give them this access? Is it just email is enough, or you try to capture, hey, where you are on the project? Are you considering those kind of questions? I mean, is it 2 questions? Is it a little thing that before you get them the access?
A lot of questions in there. I'm going to try to answer them. I'll go backwards because I have short-term memory problems. So I remember the most recent one.
We'll have it.
What do you give? The term I'm going to use is actually very not conducive to security, but think of the features that you give as like a kind Trojan horse, not a Trojan horse from the security perspective, but something where it's like, what is the thing where it just lets you get your claws in? And the thing about a good appetizer is it actually doesn't make you finished with the meal. It makes you excited for your entree. And that's how I think about the features as well, is it should be the thing that naturally encourages them to ask the next question of, well, do you have whatever? So like for Crunchbase, we want people to have an account-based approach to prospecting. So we make it easier for them to find companies that match their criteria, but then their immediate next question is, well, do you have contacts at these companies? And the contacts is one of the things that is behind the paywall. And you have to start a trial. But if you start the free trial, then you get 10 free contacts. And then if you want to have more contacts, then you have to buy contacts. So everything is a little bit of like a little appetizer to get you excited for the next thing. And they should be related.
But
right?
it's a path is what you're describing. So it's a stepped function.
Exactly. Like I think what PLG gives you is it lowers the barrier to entry and it makes the growth a lot more like smaller step function increases in the relationship versus traditional sales is truly like, we were strangers and now we're getting married tomorrow and we have to be together for the next 1, 2, or 3 years. PLG is we're strangers. Let's go on a lovely little lunch date and get to know each other. And then you want to go on another date and another date. And eventually you want to get married. And when you do get married, you're going to feel a lot better about that decision.
Okay, thank you. And then what are the competitive part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that comes down to more, do you know what your competitive advantage is? And is it like a big moat or a small moat? And if it's easily stolen by others, definitely think about how you exclude them, and email domain is a good way. But I feel like most startups have some differentiation that's not easily stolen. And if your competitors come in and are looking at you, like, imitation is the highest form of flattery, and it means that you're doing something right. So I tend to not get as caught up in what my competitors are doing and spend more time trying to ensure that I have solid differentiation. Like, the thing is, I do this to my competitors all the time. I'm looking at their pricing and packaging models, and I know that if I copy them, I'm going to be behind them because they're already running an experiment for their next one. So I try to use it more as like input rather than I want to directly copy. Again, that might not be true for your industry, so take that with a grain of salt.
So Shanee, here's the question from Jorge around PQLs, and just I'm curious how you break that down, because we've got a traditional MQL, PQL process. We generate leads for the sales team executes. Is this a different thing? And Jorge, maybe you had a different question there, but I'm curious how the two work together in your mind. And Jorge, jump in, sorry.
And thanks, Shanee.
Yeah, just throwing some insights on the PQL motion. Once you have that premium, once you're tracking all these different metrics, the next point for us was, how do we enable our sales team to look at these metrics and to have better discussions on sales calls, or SDRs have clearer reach out, or how do we even automate our existing sequences with this data to have the conversion be a little bit higher. But we did PQL scoring, and right now it's just bucketed into one PQL score. But then once we launched this, we started seeing that that score isn't enough to enable our sales team. Like, why is the score so high? What did they do that I need to make sure I call out on this email, on this call, on this demo, to really reel them into what they want to focus on. So just curious on how you structure PQLs, how you surface up that PQL data to enable your sales team.
Yeah, and for those who maybe are not as far along, so marketing qualified leads is MQL. That's more about you're doing traditional demand generation. People now are talking about product qualified leads, or PQL, where you're looking at the customer's usage and using that as an indicator of whether they're qualified to talk to sales. My personal perspective on this and the way we're solving it at Crunchbase is, I don't think sales needs to do the prospecting motion within the product. I feel like this is where now you can change what demand generation does. I feel like this is where marketing can help, because marketing is more tied into the customer usage data, and the marketing platforms are better at piping in usage data than, say, a Salesforce is. So what we're trying to do is have marketing own that step of knowing how to do the segmentation, knowing how to do that initial outreach, doing it from the perspective of, like, I'm using their email address with a shared inbox. And then once the user responds, that serves as like the ultimate qualification that they do in fact want to talk to a human being. So we take the load off of the salespeople of having to know how to do that type of segmentation, and we put it into the marketing/growth org and treat it more as like growth experimentation, where we come in with hypotheses about what are the right signals, and then we test and validate those signals. And if they are validated, then we turn them into evergreen campaigns that we train SDRs and AEs on. And we say, this is the campaign that we're running. This is the type of person that's coming through. This would be the type of conversation you should have, because these things have been qualified.
Got it. So the SDRs just are educated on the campaigns, and they respond to specific campaign. They know what they respond to.
Exactly.
So,
in fact, I have a little slide that we showed. I'll just share with you. This is what we showed the sales team, where I described, like, the top row is what I see as the happy path for people who are using Crunchbase. So you come in as an anonymous user, maybe you become active, you start a trial, you become an activated trialer, you convert, you become an activated customer, you become engaged, upgrade, expand, and then renew. And then you have the unhappy path about what happens when we start failing in any of those steps. And then you have the rescue path. And we use automation in all of these, like, we try to keep them on the happy path, we try to rescue, but there's an opportunity to bring in a human at each of these. And marketing can be that go-between to do that segmentation, to be like, okay, these are people who are on the unhappy path. An example is in our churn world, we see people who haven't been active in the last 6 months of their subscription. So we have a chance to email them and be like, hey, I see you haven't been active. Is there anything I can help you with? Marketing does that campaign. If they respond, then we might pull in either a CX or a CSM person to talk them off the ledge. So there's this opportunity for assist in each stage, but you don't have to roll it out to every single one. You can run experiments.
One quick follow-up on
Yeah.
that. Since you guys have a trial or free trial aspect to it, we've seen some companies do heavy marketing during that free trial that is more to click on a button and upgrade or click on something to do something on the application. What is your thought on having a human element during that trial to solicit a response? Like almost as a CS perspective. Hey, I noticed you just started your trial. I'm here if you have any questions, please let me know. And then kind of following up as the trial is ending. I know your trial is just about to end. Curious if you had any thoughts. Do you guys use that kind of process?
That's an experiment that we just launched. And that was that example that I was sharing where the person responded back and they're like, I actually want to buy more and I want to get a demo of the higher price product. So it's super valuable. And it makes sense, right? Like this person has just given you their credit card. Their intent is as high as a person's intent can be. That's when you should be the most white glove experience for them because they're going to make that decision. Like for Crunchbase, we have about a 20% trial to purchase conversion rate. That means 80% of people who have given us their credit card are somehow in those 7 days making the decision that like, nah, it's not for me. But if we could even win back 20% of that, that's a massive amount of customer acquisition and ARR that we're missing out on. So that's how I'm thinking about like when to deploy those humans is I look at where would I get the biggest bang for my buck because humans are expensive.
So, hey, quick question. And George, that was something in my mind as well. So thank you for asking. Do you recommend that kind of experience for ABM accounts? Because if you look at our big ICPs and ABMs, we always tend to invest more in them. And those are the ones we want to keep closer because we want them no matter what. So is engaging a human sooner a good tactics for ABM experience or should it be standard across the board?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so it's Jorge, right? I just want to make sure I get that right.
Let's go, Paul.
Yeah.
That question.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
Go Paul
Okay.
ask
Go
that-
Paul
that
asked the
one.
question that it was a follow-on on Jorge's question. So the question of when to deploy a human is another experiment to run. So for Crunchbase, what we are going to look at is how does it change the cost of acquisition when we deploy human beings who respond, any person who responds. So start with the like not filtered view. Because when you think about the response rates, you're going to send those emails and 70% of people aren't going to open those emails and maybe 5% of people are going to respond. So the volume is going to be relatively low. So it might be worth it to respond to everybody, depending on what your inbound looks like. Or if you want to, you can use it as an ABM thing. You can think of it as we're only going to deploy the humans against our named accounts or our whales. You can do both. That's what we're thinking about as well. So that's why I say it really is an experiment where you just keep testing hypotheses of what are indicators that would make it worth it to deploy a human. And then I also think there are a lot of outsourced companies that can scale that almost like a frontline worker where you have low priced SDR type skill set. And that's who you're deploying at scale. And then those people are qualifying when you hand it over to your internal, either SDR or AE team.
So
a quick follow-up to that, Shanee, what are your thoughts on a mixture? So like, low touch, very low touch approach for, company sizes under 200 or 100 or titles that aren't really, high up. That could be completely automated with some kind of, app metrics. I noticed you invited, I noticed you use X amount of something. And then these higher titles or these higher whales where it's a human and it's hyper custom to whatever they're doing. What is your thought on that?
My approach is I will always start with automation, even if it's the appearance of a personal thing. And the reason why I want to do that is in this world of efficiency, we've gone from growth at all costs to efficiency. Automation will always be cheaper. So if there's somebody who is a whale and is willing to do it on their own and they don't want to talk to a human, like bless you, I will let you do that. And then it becomes a question of when do I offer the option of a human or when do I deploy the human reaching out? One thing that we're thinking about is Your end users might be the ones who do the PLG motion, but the business decision maker may not be. So what we could do is have PLG get the bottoms up, like the end users are on the platform and loving it. And then we could deploy salespeople to the C-levels at those companies saying, hey, we noticed that a bunch of people on your team are already active on Crunchbase. Would you want to talk about it? Because there's actually some options that could reduce the costs for your company.
Yep.
I saw
To
a
be honest-
question
sorry.
about where should PLG sit, and I would love to talk about that one because it's very top of mind.
Yeah, I'm curious if as you unpack that, Shanee, you talk a little bit about day in a life as well. As you're doing all these experiments, you're reporting on things happening in the organization, and you're imposing new actions by product, by sales, by et cetera. So maybe if you can unpack not just where it sits and where it should sit, but also how it operates. Right?
Yeah, I mean, this is like the topic du jour within Crunchbase as well, is this question of, is growth in product? Is growth in marketing? Is growth in sales? And where does engineering fall across all of those? At Dropbox, we had a dedicated organization. It was a dedicated growth organization that had the full stack: engineers, product people, marketers, analysts, the whole thing. It operated independently as an organization that sat alongside the traditional product and engineering organization. Growth owned the onboarding, acquisition, and lifecycle from a revenue perspective, and retention from a revenue perspective, whereas product owned more of the innovation and the value add features. At Crunchbase, we've done it more as a dotted line. So while I am the chief growth officer, I have a couple of growth marketing managers, but we work really closely with the product managers and engineers, and we influence the roadmap. The challenge is, if you're hiring PMs and engineers under the expectation that they're going to work on product innovation, and then you ask them to work on what is traditional growth work, and that's not their interest, you might have some friction that arises from there. I think there is a different profile from the PM and engineering standpoint, whereas I feel like salespeople are more used to changing who they are every time they go to a different job. On the PM and engineering side, it's a little bit more rigid. So I think we are learning at this point that if we could go back in time, I might have fought harder for a dedicated growth organization, or at least dedicated growth product managers and owning that roadmap. So I would flag that as a potential thing that in the future could become an issue, but maybe when you're first getting started, doing more of a matrixed approach, not having a dedicated organization is okay, just in terms of speed to execution. And the profile of the people that you want at the helm are ones who understand experimentation frameworks, are ones that understand a customer journey, and that understand revenue generation as a priority. And analytics as well needs to understand that. So they have to have a deep understanding of experimentation, a deep understanding of hypothesis-driven work. And it turns out there are not many people who do know that. So I think I am seeing that like there's a subset of people who live and die that way. And then there's other people who are like, this is what I want to do. I feel like this is a good thing to do. And that's tough. Those things are sometimes at odds with each other.
Do you have any examples of where you've come back with a new product feature or something that might even be roadmap changing because of all the data that you now have?
Yeah, I mean, when you're in a smaller company, you end up having to weigh new feature creation with optimization of the existing user experience because you don't have enough engineers to do both, or the surface areas are the same. And so there have been definitely many times where I have shown what our funnel looks like, shown how these conversion rates are missing out on such huge opportunities and how small changes could result in a huge amount of revenue gain. And that has taken precedence in our roadmap. And then you end up in that debate of short-term gain versus long-term gain. So for us, we see that we have many users who only know a subset of the value they can get out of Crunchbase. So from my perspective, we should invest a lot more in the in-product onboarding experience and streamlining the user experience of using Crunchbase. But there may be others who see, okay, the reason why it's not sticky is that we don't have this more advanced feature. And so then you end up in a debate of, do you build the advanced feature or do you improve the existing user experience that you have today? And there's kind of pros and cons to each. What I typically try to do is show what percentage of people would ever even reach that advanced feature today based off the user experience. and then try to do some type of calculation on like the forecast of how much energy it would take to build that and what return on investment we would get for the company.
Vinny, do you have a particular dashboard that you use to educate the rest of the executive team there at Crunchbase? What am I working on? What is it? What are the signals that we're watching for? I mean, I'm just curious if you were to give sort of an example of a best practice on that front.
I mean, it comes down to how you actually sell your product. So we do have a trial. So our funnel is unique visitors to site, number of trials started, number of trials converted, gross new ARR from new conversions, return refund rate on that as well. And then expansions and add-ons, and then the churn and net new ARR as a result of all of that. That's on the revenue side. On the user engagement side, we're looking at weekly actives, monthly actives, and then we're doing that by cohort to see if any of our new experiments that we're rolling out are driving long-term change over time. So that's what we look at. And being able, that customer journey that I showed kind of follows that pretty similarly. And being able to look at the conversion rates between each stage is a really powerful way of helping the company prioritize, like, what do we as a business need to succeed? What is our existential threat?
And then what are the tools and or resources that you employ to make all that happen?
Well, just like everybody else, I never have as much data as I really want, and I never have access to everything that I really want. So I will not claim to say that we've got it all figured out, but we do have, we use Sisense dashboards that are powered by Snowflake data that our analytics team build. We have the platform information from like our marketing tool stack from Iterable. And then we build our own spreadsheets where we're just manually pulling in data from all these different places to track things over time. Oftentimes it depends on what, like, how does your executive team make decisions? So if you have people who are more story driven, then it comes down to like, let me show you an actual screen show of how a user was just on the struggle bus trying to do a basic thing in the product. Let's fix that. If you have a more analytically driven organization, being able to show that simplified view of the funnel and demonstrate how like a 10x improvement in one of those areas could completely change the trajectory of the business, and then offering some suggestions of strategies within that particular area. Like for Crunchbase, as an example, we walked into 2023 with knowledge that we had a couple of things that we needed to do. One was we had to make it much easier for our free users to convert, because our trial start rate is like 0.1%, which means that 99.9% of all the people who visit Crunchbase never pay. That sucks. So how do we lower the barrier to entry? The second thing that we saw is that many of the people who cancel say they didn't really know what value they had access to. So that signaled to us that we had to do a way better job in our onboarding and education. And then the third thing that we saw was that we had a bunch of payment errors. Our payment error rate is like 20-30%. So that means 30% of all the people who wanted to give us their money couldn't. So we also had to work on different payment processing solutions. And walking into 2023, knowing those things and being able to deploy teams against those things, for me, means that we will be successful as a company, even if we only make progress on one of them. But if we make progress on all three, they're compounding benefits. More free people becoming paid, more paid people being able to pay, and more paying people actually understanding what they're getting is going to lead to higher net retention over time.
So Shanee, I know you don't have a lot of bandwidth, but you're also doing some advisory stuff with folks. Maybe you can just talk about how people can maybe chat with you or connect with you or whatever.
Yeah, I am probably way too excited to talk about this than a normal person should be. So if you want to talk about reality television or product-led growth, either one of those things I'm happy to advise on. Feel free to reach out to me either on LinkedIn, or you can shoot me an email. My address is shanee@crunchbase.com, just my first name at Crunchbase. I am happy to be an advisor or chat about this with anybody who's interested.
And we are recording this, so we'll be sending out a summary to everybody. And I know some people weren't able to make today's call, so we'll be sending it out to everybody on the team who couldn't make it as well. So
awesome.
Well, Shanee, thank you so much. Any final questions from anybody? I'm just sort of you'll get contact details. Yep. Anybody else have a final question that we didn't get to? All right. Well, nice seeing everybody. Shanee, thank you for your expertise. And clearly it's an important conversation and lots to be learned here. So thank you for sharing. Nice to see everybody, as I say, and let me know if there's other topics you'd like us to pull together. And if any of you would like to be a guest speaker as well, love to have that as well. So
Thanks for having me. Great to meet you all.
okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.